Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of huge payoffs, looking at a band that was obviously going to be here this week given the audience that we have here. We're going to be looking at Porcupine Tree. The track specifically is The Incident. We've heard a lot of Porcupine Tree on the channel. I think I have a pretty good understanding of who they are and what they do. Let's dive in and see what's going on with The Incident. To be completely honest, not what I was expecting from them at all.
At junction 8, the traffic starts to slow. Artillery's breaking lights and bluish glow. Ascending in a plumage of twisted steel.
I keep looking and double checking, is this the right song? But it looks like it. I just expect this more from 9 Inch Nails than our modern prog rockers over in Porcupine Tree.
When a car crash gets you up, you flash your grin. When a fuck is not enough, you know you slipped. When the church is full, it means you've just been had. And when the world has gone to seed, you're so detached.
Absolutely nailing things in the atmosphere department. It's oppressive, haunting. A double time feel now that we have twice as many notes coming out of our drums.
Driving by on the way to somewhere else. I fill my lungs with the noxious burning smell. There's weed and gray concrete like this for miles. Dead souls in the rearview mirror hit you right a while.
Oh, that is a slick. Yeah, a slick key change right there. The song still has an air of that darkness, but it's not so oppressive anymore. You have a hope shining through the darkness. a little bit of tension. Right here, listen. That word, that love, still carries a bit of weight to it. The guitar really hanging on to that tension. I wouldn't even say it's a full resolution coming out of it, but I think it's as best a resolution as we're going to get from this track. Primarily because it seems to be negative in some component of it. And that negativity shines through very clearly in our opening 3.5 minutes, give or take, being the predominant and even exclusive side of the writing. We have the really dark, oppressive chords. We have the eerie sounds. Everything is unsettling, overbearing, especially when the distorted guitars come in and bring that weight in from the sides. It feels claustrophobic even at times, and I don't know, man, just Steven, man. I feel like every time y'all give me a Steven Wilson track, whether it's solo work or Porcupine Tree or maybe even something else that he's been a part of. I know him and the Opeth dude have a side project. Can't remember what that's called. But I feel like anytime Steven's involved, I get a very clear reading. He just does a fantastic job of having the emotions of the song and the story they tell front and center. You know, you can certainly write it off as being too surface level, where the music immediately tells you what you're supposed to be feeling, but I think there's also a craft to that sort of clarity, right? I don't think anybody, man, this is not a great example here. I don't know how universal this example is either, but I don't think anybody would write off Dr. Seuss as a poor writer. His stuff is exceptionally simple, but there comes a clarity and uniqueness from that simplicity. And I think that's sort of what I want to relate Steven Wilson to. He absolutely knows how to immediately evoke what he wants out of a section, and it becomes a surface level read in a way. I wouldn't say that much of his music has ever confused me or left me in a state of wondering what two ideas are supposed to mean combined. Absolutely allows the song to wear its emotions on its sleeve. Um, and it makes the storytelling of the song very direct and straightforward in a way that I can usually pull out some pretty deep analysis on it in a way that I don't always get out of most tracks. Um, yeah, just Steven, man. When I see his name, I know we're in for a good analysis. Um, but yeah, so, our whole opening 3 minutes is just wait. It is darkness, eeriness, just tension, anxiety. We'll get back to some of this in a second. But the back 30% of this track, our last minute and a half, give or take, is that with a similar root chord, just taken in a different key. So it starts out when we make that shift, which I think is the payoff. And yeah, this is a pretty good payoff here. You sit and you dwell in this darkness for so long, and it starts to feel repetitive. And there's certainly a point when I was thinking, okay, where does this go, though? It's not that our opening was entirely monotonous, but that it all was one feeling. We explored that in a couple of different ways. It created variety of sections within that. But that overall atmosphere was static. And so we're just dwelling in this, where does it go? Where are we taking this? And it was this, and I really like it because it isn't a ray of light punching through some dark clouds and shining light everywhere. The spell has been broken, and we get to see a couple of shots of the world all decayed, and then a wash of magic flies over, and everything's bright and cheerful again, right? We don't get that. What we get is something that still feels familiar. That first chord of the key change, I was thinking, something's different here, but what is it? I'm pretty sure they used the same root tone. So if it was, I don't know, if it was a C whatever key, right? We're still in the key of C. We've just changed what style of keyword. Maybe we're in minor. Who knows? But the thing is that the root note is the same, which allows the building blocks to be similar. And what it does is it makes this first chord very ambiguous. It is sort of where we've been this whole time, but not. And I'm not sure what's changed, but something has changed, but not all of it. And I really appreciate this, the ambiguity of this first step. Assuming that the song is, and the idea I get out of this is dwelling in darkness, whatever that darkness is, depression, bad decisions, addiction, whatever. I don't know what the song's about. Just the cycle of this, and taking that first step and that anxiety, that tension, that unknowingness. Part of the allure of the bad cycle is the familiarity of it. It's comforting. You might even know it's not healthy, but it's what you know, and it's not scary in that way. The first step towards a recovery is immensely scary. There is no idea what is on the other side, and that ambiguity is brought forth right here, where there's still darkness. We haven't made a complete 180, but there's something else here. And as we further explore this chord progression, we continue to hear this. There's still bits of tension in stuff like that word. I think it was love in the second chord. Um, I think moving into the second chord, that word love, though, just tons of tension on it, deliberately leans into some dissonance. One of the guitars is still shining through with a bit of that eerie tone and playing around with dissonance. The chord progression itself is mixed. There's brightness to it, there's darkness to it. And so I just really like this, where there's an obvious shift. We are in a totally different place here, but it's also not 100% different. There is a shine of hope through here, but we haven't completely eradicated that darkness we were in. And I love that storytelling. It's a bunch of nuance. And let's dive into that nuance. The opening, the dark, heavy part, right? Sparse, isolating, vulnerable. We have a lead vocal that is barely audible. We have a whispered vocal bouncing back and forth. No idea what it's saying. But it is just right on the periphery, whispering certainly not sweet nothings in my ear. I don't know what he's saying, but it is done in an eerie way, an uncomfortable way. A how did you get into my personal space kind of creepiness. A lot of the tones being used here might be guitars, but my closest analogy is something synthy. They're very narrow, they're very warbly, they're very strained. You could certainly create any of this with the guitar as well. And for all I know, the guitar is the bass instrument on a lot of these sounds, but I get a very industrial sort of Nine Inch Nails vibe, which I mentioned earlier. There's just a variety of sounds expertly placed throughout the track in a way more reminiscent of electronica music than rock, and all done so in an isolating way. The sounds never touch each other. Everything in here is collectively presenting a song, but nothing in here really knows of each other's existence. It's more of a happenstance that any of it comes together in a way that is song-like. And of course, it's more of a narrative angle to read it. Of course, somebody wrote these notes all together to create the song. It's done that way. But there's just so much distance between all of the notes. There's a lot of panning, hard panning. Rarely are two sounds ever going off in the same area. There's center, there's halfway to the sides, there's full out to the sides. There's a lot of placement for things. Um, and then there's also pitch as well. You notice that no two instruments really play around in the same range of notes. It's empty. The song feels lonely. And not only does it feel lonely, but everything around it is dangerous and foreboding. The best word to sum all of this up is ominous. But I think even that lacks the weight of this once the electric guitars come in and presents a very Korn style new metally riffage that basically sits around one tone, sometimes goes up a half step but quickly comes back down just to create a little bit of movement, but decidedly working within this monolithic singular sound that is massive compared to everything else in here. If all of these sounds are narrow and small and isolated from each other, distance wise, the guitar comes in and envelops everything in animosity, hatred. I don't know. Just something very large and pressing. It is a weight that pulls everything down with it. And through this intensity, we lose um, some of that isolation, and the song ends up not feeling as empty anymore. In fact, it feels like the walls are caving in. It begins to feel claustrophobic. And in response to that, our vocals shift from quieter, more vulnerable to shouting. It's still a clean, but there's volume and projection. To me, it almost sounds like a cry for help at this point. Didn't really want anybody's help previously, but now that things have changed, uh, you know, maybe I am a little scared here. All of this, of course, culminates eventually into our outro. The nuance here, I think, is interesting because it's not about telling a specific vibe, it's about balancing two different vibes. We have the chord progression, which is trying its best to carry both sides, a little bit of hope, but retaining that. I don't even know if darkness is the right word, just the anxiety. And I think it does a fine line of walking both lines, and so everything else in the track is designed primarily to exemplify one side or the other. The bass line follows the chord progression's uh, brighter ideas. Chords they give us emotions based on notes, and some notes in a triad or a chord will give us brighter sounds, some will give us darker sounds. The intervals between them will also create atmospheric emotions with them. The bass, to me, follows the ones that kind of give the brighter side, trying to give some extra weight to that. While the guitars, we do still have that compressing, big, massive, weighty sound coming in from the outside. That is certainly continuing on with this ominous presence, something catching up to us. But we also have another guitar that sort of just plays sounds in like the left side over here. Um, Still kind of those angular, sharp, piercing sounds, dancing between dissonance and consonance, almost uh, trying to figure out where it wants to be. before ultimately landing on a highly dissonant tone and holding that for a few bars before finding a sort of resolution at the end as the final note of the track. It is, to me, the highs and lows of breaking out of negativity. Again, whatever that negativity is, it's understanding that some days you fall off the horse and you've got to get back on. You can't fall back to that cycle that we were in for the majority of this track. The hope needs to stay there. It's a wild journey that it took me on, and once again, Steven, man, puts a lot of ideas in my head. I'm going to take a moment here. We're going to look at some lyrics, see what a more literal reading of some of this might be, and if anything I heard in the track is reflected in the lyrics at all. Interesting take for a song. A little bit of extra info here. The song comes from a sign on roads that would say incident ahead if there was an accident or something. It would warn people that, there's going to be some congestion, maybe traffic patterns have changed. There's, a disabled car or two on the road that you got to make accommodations for. Maybe some, emergency vehicles and stuff. Just a heads up road sign. The idea, though, that something like an accident could be an incident, just a small little thing in someone's day, you know, to the people in the accident, depending on how horrendous the accident is, this is a major thing that could actually have lasting effects financially and mentally and even physically, health wise. But for everybody else, it's just an incident. It's just this thing that's going to delay you, right? And so the song is about that. That whisper at the beginning was get demolished. You get demolished. I don't like that. In the context of all this, it feels more like a whisper of fate. You're just driving and you get demolished. And you're like, well, who said that? And now you're freaking out, right? Depending on how superstitious or spiritual you are, you might take this as a warning of something that's going to happen today. That's certainly the vibe I get it in the song. It's off to the sides being whispered in my ear, almost feeling external to the song itself. The first verse describes the accident itself. At junction 8, the traffic starts to slow. Artilleries of braking lights in bluish glow, ascending in a plumage of twisted steel, shattered glass, confetti dashed upon the wheel. So, just a highway. Traffic starts to slow down. Brake lights, headlights, I assume, is the bluish glow. And out of all this is a plumage of twisted steel, a terrible wreck, it seems. Shattered glass. It says I think it's interesting. It says confetti dashed upon the wheel. I think it's interesting both when you look at it as the glass itself being dangerous. Shattered glass is a thing that most people would be careful about being around. But when it comes to, I don't know how universal this term is, but the rubberneckers. I don't know if that's just a southern thing, maybe it's just a US thing. But the people, when they're driving by an accident, have to slow down and look at it, and it slows traffic down even more. And everybody does it, which creates this accordion effect as traffic scrunches down to a close right at the accident, but is fairly spaced out in front of and behind it. But the idea that everybody else, this is something to look at. This is something to maybe call, oh my God, you'll never see the wreck that I saw on the road today, right? It is a dangerous situation for those involved and an event, possibly. It's a morbid way to describe it for everyone else. Verse 3 speaks about driving by. It says, driving by on my way to somewhere else, I fill my lungs with a noxious burning smell. There's weed and gray concrete like this for miles, dead souls in my rearview mirror, hitch a ride a while. The idea that somebody's life could have just been taken in this incident. There's burning, there's fire. This is terrible. And you just drive by. You got somewhere else to be. It says dead souls in my rearview mirror. I think that's both the literal thing. It is behind me. Literally, I see it in my rearview mirror, but also after today, am I even going to remember it? Am I even going to remember it 5 hours from now? You just passed by a place where somebody died, and it's just not even a blip in your history. If you remember it to the end of the day, to the end of the week, are you going to remember it in 10 years? It's sort of just something that happens. Just a casual element of it. It's a really interesting way to view all of this. And at this point, the singer, we shift over to the ending, which is a little more hopeful, but still negative. The vocals just say, I want to be loved. The annotation for this says that the narrator has come to make a change in their life. They're moved by seeing what just happened and realize that they're missing something in their life. Specifically, love. And so they want to further explore more of life. And specifically, they want to find someone to love them and for them to love. There is a change. We do break out of a cycle. My entire read of everything in the music was accurate-ish, but I had a completely different story going on here. It's an interesting thing to make a song about. I think it's a relevant topic, especially as, well, let's face it, brutality and people down on their luck is kind of the 24-hour news cycle. It's very easy to become numb to the idea of people in pain, people dying. It's impossible to avoid that information if you spend any time paying attention to the world around you. And I think it does become easy to become numb to it, to where death and brutality and negativity and just harm in general is background noise to your daily life. And I think the song is a reminder that we need to break out of that and find the humanity in life again. It's not an easy step, or it's not an easy task, but you got to take that first step. You got to move towards it. And I appreciate the entire angle here. Interesting way to deliver it, but I think it gets through. Those are my thoughts on Porcupine Trees, The Incident, the most Nine Inch Nails song I've ever heard from them. uh, what are your thoughts, though? Give me your opinions, perspectives, whatever. You agree with me, disagree with me, got some stuff to add, throw all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to my music. You'll find a link to Linktree, which takes you to this thing. It's got links to my music, link to the Discord server, links to support the channel, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, we have a special selection coming up. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.